I'm certain you have seen the hashtag Justice for Namhla that has been trending on social media pretty much throughout the day, and we are trying to get a hold of the late Namhla's sister, Sanga Mtwa, just to talk to her about this case and what exactly has been going on. And we are still going to keep trying to get a hold of her, and as soon as we can, we'll bring you that conversation. But let's stay with the issues around gender-based violence and femicide and speak now to Dr. Lesley Ann Foster, founder and director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International. Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for your time. Certainly very concerning what we see and continue to hear when it comes to issues around gender-based violence. But I can't help but start with the fact that must it always take public outcry for the victims to get justice?
Good evening, Pongiwe and viewers. I would like to start by saying my condolences to the families that have lost their beloved daughters, mothers, sisters, and so forth in the past few months. It's really sad when that happens. And yes, that's a very good question. Must there be an outcry first? And I want to go to the words of Mohammed Fotale, who's a famous African gynecologist, that says women are dying not because of illness and disease, but because society has yet to decide that their lives matter. And that's at the root of this, is the issue of inequality and the low status of women in our society. Women's lives, women's bodies have become commodified. They've become expendable because they are not valued enough within our society. And that's where we have to start, is how do we bring back the values and the principles of respect for life and respect for liberty in our country. The basic human rights are at play here, and we see that this is flouted to a greater extent when we look at women and girls, the lives of women and girls. I think when we talk about femicide, it is most visible when you see so many women being killed just because they are women, and it's often by men they know, men they have been in relationships with. So that shows, when I talk about the commodification, is that when men go into relationships with women, some men, they actually then feel that they own those women, and if the women want to end their lives, they then kill them, because they just feel that that's their right to do that. And we have to change that within our society. That's when we talk about the change of norms and standards in our society, attitudes and behaviors. And it's a big task to do that. It's a big task when it's normalized within our society that women's lives don't matter to the same degree that men's lives matter. And that because they are women, they can be treated with violence and brutality. So these are the basics, the drivers of violence in our country that we have to deal with. Now, the positives are that there are a lot of initiatives now to actually attend to that. I still think that we're not doing enough when we talk about changing attitudes and behaviors. We're not doing enough, and that's the prevention element. We can have the legislation, but we can't legislate for change. Change has to happen through widespread systemic programs that make us look at who we are as people, look at our humanity, look at issues of dignity, of respect, of perseverance of life. Those are the key issues that we need to change. And we're not winning. We're not yet far enough on that road to changing that. And that's so sad, because when we focus only on victims, it's too late. It is just too late. We have to focus on prevention, focus on changing the way women are viewed in our society. And that starts from the time they're born.
Dr. Foster, I'd like to stay with that because, looking at a case like Namhla's, for example, there's a number of people on social media that are saying, but why did she stay? Why did she stay for so long, 17 years in such an abusive relationship? But really, when these type of questions are being asked, it shows that also there's very little understanding about what abuse actually does to the self-esteem of the victim.
Yes. Well, I think that there are a couple of issues here. First of all, in society, we put the shame and the blame for violence onto women. Okay, we guilt trip them. And women's value is attached to how they are and how they can maintain a relationship. Okay, and we socialized into that. So our whole socialization process teaches us as women that you have to stay, even if you feel unsafe, even if you fear, for your life, you stay in that relationship. Because there are not supportive mechanisms around women, or enough supportive mechanisms around women, they stay in those relations. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that when they fall in love with someone who shows their best side, and they really, they get courted in a way that makes them feel good, happy, and so forth. And they always look for that. They always go back looking for that. But there are times when a woman knows she's in danger, and she will go and seek help and still not be supported by her family structures or her community structures. And that's because the family structures and community structures are socialized themselves into the patriarchal notion that the man is always right, or the man is always on top. And so therefore, the woman has to be the one that is at fault. And that's the stuff that we have to change. It's very difficult to change that. It's very difficult, if you haven't had a family situation or a community situation where women are really lifted up, where you are taught to respect them. A lot of communities across our country actually teach that, but there are communities where that doesn't happen. It also goes back to parenting, goes back to the issue of absent fathers, where there are no positive role models that women and men have in their lives. And then, of course, toxic masculinity. What we have in our society right now is toxic masculinity. And we see men get caught up in addictions, men get caught up, in power plays, power that comes through toxic behavior. And all of this contributes towards the oppression and the discrimination of women in our society.
So, Dr. Foster, if I can then ask you, because this point that you've made is quite crucial, where you talk about the social support and even the family support of the women. What does that look like? Because we also see from some of the victims and even messages that are doing the rounds right now that there are some that would say, for example, to Namhla, I know that he beat you up, but I can't picture you without him, for example. This is not unique to this particular situation. We keep seeing it. So what does support look like for the families? Because some of them would say, but she wanted to keep going back to this particular person, so our hands are tied. What do we do? So what would you say then is the appropriate way here?
For me, the most important thing that I think we teach in our organization is that women have to have agency. Women have to understand their own power and their own value, because it does start with us. And we don't teach that to our daughters. We don't teach them that they have power. We don't teach them that they have agency. So that's one of the things that we have to do in our society. Secondly, we have to tell women to get out. The first act of violence is just an indication of what's to come. And then the important thing is to get out at that point. We don't teach women that. We don't teach them that. We'll say, no, it'll blow over, or it'll get better, or something like that. So I think that's an important thing, is to look at, first of all, what is the work we do with young girls in schools? At a very young age, what is the work we do with men and boys starting at a young age? And that socialization process, showing women that they have, we have to stop teaching women that they're pretty in pink, that their role is about, domestic work, and that they are the ones that haven't got power. What we've seen in our new democracy is that women are rising up in very powerful ways across all sectors in our society. We need much more of that kind of work, that teaches girls about their own inner power, their own inner beauty, their own inner, issue agency, as we call it, the ability to make choices and decisions that are good and healthy for themselves. The important thing is always to choose the healthy way of living, the healthy kind of relationships. If a relationship becomes unhealthy, at that point, you have to walk away from it. And our society does not teach us that.
Now, when you look at the other side of the coin, there's society, but at the same time, there's the handling of such cases by police. I remember the police minister talking about the gender-based violence desks, for example, that must be established at police station level, and police must not be negotiating with the alleged perpetrators. They must be arresting them. They should not be telling women to go back home and to fix things, for example. That is also a problem. The handling of this by police is a problem, because we're even seeing allegations here on this whole matter around the Namhla situation.
But it's exactly what I've been saying to you. Patriarchy teaches us that women carry the shame and blame. Men are exonerated from such violence. That's what we learn. So they take that worldview into the work of policing. And that's what they use when they have to face a case of femicide or a case of rape or incest or domestic violence. So we have to change attitudes and behaviors in both genders. We have to change our entire society's view of women, because you will always find that men then come with this perspective of, we're going to use a traditional or a cultural or a religious lens to look at this case through, and we adjudicate it on that basis. That's happening far and wide in our country, and that's what we as women activists are saying has to change. That's why we're on the streets, campaigning all the time and saying we want the state to change that. And while the state has made many positive changes, these things, this real deep work that has to happen, at the level of the changing the minds of people, that's not happening enough yet. There are pockets of it, small pockets, and the state has the responsibility to make those changes, not civil society organization, because the state can run, statewide programs, countrywide programs to make those changes. It's expensive because you're going to have to train everybody from your entire judicial system, that's the police, to judges, because you still get adverse decisions in the courts. There's a lot of change that has to happen. Your health workers, teachers in schools, all of these things have to change. And I think the investment into that is not enough. In fact, I know the investment isn't enough. And we're having, a lot of conversations at the national level to say, what do we change? And we're getting angry as women. We're getting angry because we're not safe. If I walk out of my door here, I'm not safe. My daughter's not safe. No one's safe. We all know that. So we are saying, what is the state going to do to create the safety nets around women in our society, starting with their attitudes and behaviors? We don't want the funerals. We don't want the victim empowerment. We want no victims, and particularly no femicides. That's the bottom line. That's where we draw the line in the sand. It's got to stop completely.
Especially because, there's now 3 bills that have been signed into law when it comes to dealing with gender-based violence. But let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for that. Do appreciate it. That's Dr. Lesley Ann Foster, founder and director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International.